Good morning everyone, and welcome to today's event, and welcome to the Lunar New Year 2025 Year of the Snake. My name is Amy Zah. I'm the Coordinator of Community History and Heritage for the Inner West Council. And firstly, I would like to do an acknowledgement. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Gadigal Mongol people of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Today's event is a collaboration with the volunteers of the Powerhouse Museum, with a special presentation of migration and market gardens, highlighting Ashfield's own beloved Kwong Tart. We do hope you enjoy today's presentation. There's a lot of information to get through and a really wonderful program, so thank you for coming. I now welcome the volunteers of the Powerhouse Museum. Thank you.
Good morning everyone, great to see all of you here today and welcome to Collection Conversations. My name is Roger Leong and I'm a Senior Curator at the Powerhouse Museum, and we'd really like to thank Inner West Council for having us here today. Now, this Collection Conversations program is run by the Volunteers Department. We have Helen and Gemma over here who are part of that department, and it's run weekly at different libraries and community centres around Sydney, and it investigates different themes inspired by and supported by objects in our collection. They're not objects in our collection, by the way, they're like sort of objects. And I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the ancestral homelands on which our Powerhouse Museums are situated, and we respect their elders past, present and future, and recognise their continuous connection to country. And I would also like to wish everyone a happy Year of the Snake. So today we're joined by our wonderful volunteers Phoebe Choi and Kim Vo and Gemma Newland from our Volunteers Department, and they're going to present on migration and market gardens. Now, I just would like to say, even though I grew up in Melbourne, my uncle Raymond actually had a tofu factory in Glebe from the 1950s, I think, to the 1970s. And so he supplied a lot of the restaurants in Chinatown. So now I'm going to pass you to Gemma, who is going to start off by talking about Kwong Tart.
Thank you, Roger. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes, fantastic. So, in the book, The Chinese-Australian Migration Corridor, philanthropist Tim Ingold proposes that we think of human lives as lines of becoming, shaped by history, destiny, and the paths that we choose. These lines are entangled with other humans' lives to form knots, a rich meshwork of human experience. Now, this concept of meshwork speaks directly to the Chinese-Australian Migration Corridor, where lives were not simply lived, but were woven together by chance and choice. In every place that we eat together, sleep together, transact business, and laugh together, these lines knot in shared moments and opportunities. In the story of Kwong Tart, we see the power of this meshwork, the way individual lives can knot to form something far greater than the sum of their parts. So Mei Guanda, better known as Kwong Tart, was born in 1850 in Guangdong, China, and went on to become one of the most well-known Chinese Australians of the late 19th and 20th centuries. Emigrating to Sydney during the gold rush, he became well known for his tea importation business and successful chain of tea rooms, especially the establishment of Kwong Tart's tea rooms. He became a symbol of the successful integration of Chinese immigrants into Australian society at the time, breaking racial barriers and forming connections to both Chinese and broader communities. Word reached his home that untold wealth could be collected from the Australian goldfields. He successfully pleaded to be allowed to accompany his uncle, who was journeying to Australia to take charge of a group of Chinese miners and traders working in the goldfields. On arrival in New South Wales in 1859, he was fortunate in having his guardians a Scottish couple. Mr. Simpson had leased a portion of the Braidwood goldfields, employing hundreds of principally Chinese miners. It was he who helped Kwong Tart acquire an important gold claim, which helped make him a very wealthy man. At age 21, he was granted a certificate of naturalisation, and at 32, he headed for Sydney, where he decided to establish himself as a tea and silk merchant. But to do that, he needed a reliable supply of quality tea. So he returned to China, and after extensive travel through many regions, he established his own tea plantations. So when we consider this concept of meshwork, buildings represent an obvious form of knot. As Ingold puts it, lives unfold not inside of places, but through, to, and from them, from and to places elsewhere. An example of a knot in the meshwork of Chinese migrant lives in Sydney, we might consider Quang Tat's revolution of casual dining in Sydney. The opening of a series of restaurants on George Street at 137 King Street, which you can see at the right of this picture, was the elite hall and dining rooms in Central Markets, which is now exactly where the Queen Victoria building sits. So this model specifically is part of 23 buildings created to recreate this streetscape of King Street, Sydney, in the 1880s. And they're all part of the Powerhouse collection and are currently on display at our Castle Hill Discovery Centre. So Quang Tat was renowned for being an excellent employer, giving employees paid sick leave and many other entitlements unheard of at the time. And this next slide is a wood carving of Quang Tat and Company trademark, the same logo that adorned all the packers, caddies, and boxes of his Loong Shan tea. Contemporary photos of the tea rooms suggest that this trademark formed part of the decorative ceiling divider on the elite dining room hall, the one that I mentioned previously. In 1886, a time in which his presence and respect in Sydney was growing, the Daily Telegraph described the George Street rooms as tastefully decorated with works of art from the East. This acquisition specifically can be used to examine Quang Tat's assimilation and acceptance into Sydney's society at a time of growing anti-Chinese sentiment. But the tea rooms didn't just cater for the elite. They were also marketed towards the women of Sydney, with lounges equipped with writing materials, magazines, and powder rooms. Sydney in the late 1800s was no place for a lady. I was most surprised to learn that there were no public toilets for women. Not only that, but also the city offered few places where women could eat and drink. Pubs were off limits, and cafes, oyster saloons, and cigar shops, coffee houses which catered for tobacco smokers, were a little too racy for girls keen to protect their good reputations. So his tea rooms subsequently became hubs of social and political activity, a place in which the subject of female suffrage was actually first raised. The suffragettes planned the campaigns for the vote, for women's rights, for kindergartens, and for equal pay in these tea rooms. The tea rooms weaved together lives that would go on to play a pivotal role in the women's suffrage movement. At 38, Quang Tat married an Englishwoman, Margaret Scarlett, who was the owner of this Chinese surcoat, which is part of the Powerhouse's collection. They raised 6 children, 4 girls and 2 boys. Tat was also an active philanthropist. He provided dinners for inmates of destitute asylums, campaigned against the opium trade, acted as an interpreter, became the first Chinese person in Australia to be admitted to the Society of Freemasons. He was an acting consul to the Chinese government, and for his services to the overseas Chinese community and European Chinese relations, the Chinese emperor made him an honorary mandarin. He was also patron of many Braidwood institutions, such as the lodges, sporting clubs, and the Anglican Church, and found time even to become an officer in the National Guard. In August 1902, while counting the takings in his office in the Queen Victoria Markets, he was brutally attacked with an iron bar. He never completely recovered, and he died of illness 11 months later at age 53. His funeral from his home in Ashfield comprised of 200 men, headed by the Band of Professional Musicians Association. Although he converted to Christianity after his arrival in Australia, he never forgot his Chinese roots. He was buried wearing traditional Chinese clothes and the Freemason's apron, with thousands attending to pay their respects. Quang Tat's legacy is a testament to his vision, compassion, and innovation. From the goldfields of Braidwood to the heart of Sydney, his journey reflected connection at a time when Chinese migrants were actively immersing themselves in Australia. His tea rooms were more than just places to dine. They were threads in a larger fabric, knotting for women to find a community, a voice, a platform, and change in a city that often left them without one. Quang Tat's life and legacy reminded us that we're all part of an intricate web, where each individual action and connection can ripple out and strengthen us as a whole. Through his philanthropy, advocacy, and commitment to equality, Quang Tat wove together cultural divides and helped shape Sydney into a more inclusive society. His contributions show us that the threads that we choose to weave with each other can create a legacy that endures, binding us together in ways that transcend time and endure for generations. Now I'd like to invite Kim, who's going to speak about the inner west of Sydney in the late 19th century.
Okay, thanks, Gemma. My name is Kim, and I'm a volunteer at the Powerhouse Museum. And today, I would like to explore the vibrant community and dynamic changes occurring in Sydney inner west during the late 19th century, a period that shaped the very essence of the region. In the late 19th century, white Australians in Sydney inner west were primarily involved in agriculture, small-scale manufacturing, and trade. Many European settlers established homes and businesses as the area transitioned from rural land to urban suburbs. However, the growing Chinese population often faced mixed reaction from their white Australian neighbors, with some embracing cultural exchange, while others expressed xenophobia, particularly through restrictive immigration policy. While the market garden flourished along the Cook River Flat, providing fresh produce, Marrickville, Canterbury, and Dunwich Hill were evolving from swamp into bustling suburbs thriving by migration and industrial growth. In 1861, Marrickville was officially incorporated as a municipality, as noted in the Sydney Morning Herald, and the suburb transferred from a dreary waste into a thriving community filled with well-lit streets and handsome residences. This change was not merely physical, it represents the aspiration of a diverse population seeking a better life. At the heart of this transformation was the arrival of the railway in the 1880s, the so-called Iron Horse. You can see on this photo the horse-driven cart is on the rail. That is the Iron Horse at that time. This innovation connected the inner west to the broader Sydney network, making it easier for residents to travel and for goods to flow in and out. It brought with it new opportunity for trade and commerce, and with the market garden already in place, the region became a crucial player in Sydney urban food supply. Chinese shopkeepers play a vital role in shaping the local community. Their businesses serve not only the needs of their community, but also acted as cultural hubs, fostering cross-cultural interaction. The network underscores the complexity of cultural exchange within the rapidly evolving inner west. Our Powerhouse collection contains a fascinating artifacts from this time. A Chinese suana, you can see on the screen, a traditional wind instrument often used in celebration and parade. Dates back to around 1880, the suana reflects the rich musical traditions brought by Chinese immigrants and symbolize cultural identity and meet challenges. Additionally, we have a set of the 19th century playing cards represent leisure activities among Chinese population, which number around 1,300 at that time. Entrepreneurs like Quang Tat contributed to the cultural landscape, fostering trade and social hubs that enrich community life. Chinatown, emerging during the gold rush in the mid-19th century, became a vibrant cultural enclave centered around Dixon Street and the Haymarket. Initially designated as a market site in 1829, the Haymarket transformed into a lively destination for trade and entertainment with the construction of Melbourne and Paddy Market. The object on the screen is from our collection, is a traditional undergarment, as you can see by the lack of the color. White it isn't related, but this would have been similar to what have been worn by the wife of the market garden people. It is interesting to visit Chinese and Vietnamese market garden today. Often they are wearing very similar clothing like this, with button in a similar placement, button in the middle. The cultural landscape of the inner West during this time was rich and diverse. Immigrants from various backgrounds settled in the area, each contributing to its unique character. This development highlights the hard work of residents who created a welcoming and industrious community. As we walk through the streets of Marrickville or Dunwich Hill today, the legacy of early Chinese shopkeepers is evident in Sydney's contemporary Chinese community. Finally, please welcome our volunteer Phoebe, who will speak about the history of the market garden in New South Wales.
I'm Phoebe. I'm one of the volunteers working at the Powerhouse Museum. And thank you very much today for your attention and really appreciate it. Now, a market garden is a small farm or garden that grow a variety of vegetables and herbs, typically for sale at the local markets. They are usually located near urban areas to supply fresh produce quickly to local communities. The Chinese were one of the most important communities in Sydney that grew vegetables on market gardens. They have supplied households or wholesale markets in the cities over the last 100 years. Vegetable garden has been a tradition in China for thousands of years. The Chinese in Sydney brought their agricultural practices with them. Over decades of urbanization, developments have been increasingly encroached on the market garden and the small farms at the fringe of the urban centers. Supermarkets has also gradually replaced the traditional fresh food shops. Today, there are only a handful of market gardens that are under heritage listing protection in operation in the original sites, using the original cultivation methods in our city fringe. Chinese market gardens were usually run on a cooperative basis between 5 or 10 men working in an informal partnership. Their solidarity reinforced by family kinship, village origins, and marriage. The cooperative system meant partners would share both the cost of operation, the tools employed, and the profit, or sometimes loss, and indeed there were losses, made while ensuring a partner could be easily replaced, either temporarily or permanently, if a return to China was required. The Sydney farmers sold their vegetables to the Chinese restaurant directly or to the Haymarket in the city. Some European market gardeners expressed resentment towards their Chinese counterpart. Europeans typically purchased the farmland at a considerable expense. In contrast, most Chinese market gardens were leased only, rather than purchased, with the major outlay being the rent, the seeds, the gardening tools, fertilizers, and manual labors. Living conditions were harsh, and housing was very, very basic. Due to the population and other land use pressure, most of these market gardens have now been transformed into parks, significant infrastructures, or housing developments. One example of a very well-known market gardener was George Louis Gay, 1870 to 1946. He was born in Dutao village in Zhongshan and left there for Australia in 1890. Actually, Zhongshan is the same area where my own family come from. He then married Ada Hong, a Chinese-Australian woman from Goulburn. Together, George and Ada leased the land at Rose Bay on the Sydney Harbour to establish a market garden. When the local council resumed the land of what we now know the Royal Sydney Golf Club. Yes, the Gay family bought another piece of land, a 32 acres out in Guildford, about 6 kilometers south of Parramatta, to create a market garden that operated until 1950. The Gay family's farmland in Guildford had a timber bungalow which had a fenced surrounding veranda with French doors opening onto it. He had to clear the bushland before the market garden could be a reality. The family grew lettuce, potato, and other vegetables. They shared a stall at the fruit and vegetable market in the Sydney Haymarket, taking their produce there by horse-drawn carts, and later they purchased a truck to deliver the goods. In 1938, they still used kerosene lamps on the properties for lighting, and for electricity was not installed at those days. Bill operated the market garden until 1950 with his family. When Parramatta Council bought the land, which turned into a park and building block, the Parramatta Council erected a site to remembrance of the Gay family. You can still find that sign there today. While there are not nearly as many market gardens left, the remaining ones scattered across Sydney are still thriving amongst local communities. Last year in August, I visited the Chinese market garden in Randwick, in La Perouse, and also in Arncliffe. And these gardens have been farmed for more than 150 years, and they have fought to keep it alive, still using the traditional labor-intensive farming methods. While I never saw it myself, visiting these sites reminded me of stories I heard from my own grandmother about her own gardens in Zhongshan in China. Through many discussions with Kim about the Chinese and the Vietnamese gardens, market gardens, we had found that there had been very little changes from the traditional market gardens. The production line we saw today, from the city fringe market to the Asian grocery fronts across the state, the industry remained nearly identical. On that note, I give you back so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. That wraps up the end of our talk. I hope you all enjoyed it, and thank you so much to our wonderful volunteers. As Phoebe just said, they spent a lot of time going and visiting the market gardens and doing a lot of research to kind of get primary sources in line. So thank you so much to all the hard work from them and everyone else behind the scenes. I hope that you all leave here and kind of look out for the places of the Chinese market gardens and other influence of the Chinese-Australian migration corridor as you wander around Sydney.